That Naturopathic Podcast. TNP.
Hello there.
Hi, and thanks for joining us. I'm Dr. Michelle Pobega, naturopathic doctor.
And I'm Dr. David Miller, ND, and we hear your frustrations. This show is for you.
This show is for you if you're feeling like your current healthcare strategy is not getting to the root cause or the underlying reasons for your health.
This show is for you if you've been told that you're fine, but you definitely don't feel very well.
This show is for you if you're walking out of your doctor's office with 1, 2, 3, 4, or even 5 medications without any mention of diet, lifestyle, or a long-term game plan.
This show is for you if you've got several specialists taking care of you, but no one is really putting all the pieces together.
This show is for you if you believe that health should be part of healthcare. These problems have solutions.
We know it.
Our patients know it.
And we want you to know it.
Naturopathic medicine is the solution that you should know about.
Welcome to another episode of That Naturopathic Podcast. Dr. David Miller, ND, with Dr. Michelle Pobega, ND here. What's up?
Hi, everybody. I'm recovering from a cold, so I apologize if I accidentally hack into the microphone. I will try to mute myself before doing so. I just wanted to put that out there.
She's a bit raspy.
Yeah. Smelly cat, smelly cat. All friends people will understand what that means.
Which does not include me, but I am included in this podcast episode.
Yes. Hello,
sir. Which we're gonna call "Shit My ND Says," because this is stuff that we talk about. Either like we did a little bit of a chat before this, and we both talk about most of these things to some degree every day with people. And sometimes when you find yourself saying the same things all the time, you're sort of like, well, I should probably share this with a couple other people. In case it's obvious,
make a handout,
sorry.
Make a conference, make a webinar, make a podcast episode,
or just do a podcast episode and hope that it hits home for some younger practitioners or just people trying to make sure that you're checking all your boxes.
Indeed.
Okay, so a lot of these have to do with some of the basic foundations, with a little bit extra detail on a couple things. Michelle's got a focus on a couple things that I don't as much, and I focus, as everyone knows if you've listened to this, on the stomach. And so, of course, I'm going to have to say something about the stomach. But do you want to start off the hop, Michelle? Because we all come from water.
And I just wanted to say, like Dave was saying, this is stuff we have to often tell people, because this is often not really part of people's headspace when it comes to the day-to-day life. A lot of people go into autopilot, and we've adopted terrible habits that are not actually giving your body the right building blocks to show up the way you want them to. So it's really about that foundational stuff. So back to water. We are mostly water. Water is the best conductor of electricity, and we are also electrical. Ta-da! So I usually tell people, I always ask, one of my questions when I go through their dietary intake is, how do you start your day? When I ask about breakfast, I was like, do you start your day with water? Do you start your day with some source of caffeine? Do you start your day with food? And more often than not, people are like, oh, I get a coffee first, or I eat and then I have a coffee. A handful of people take water, but then it's like, I take a little bit of water, take my pills, and then I have coffee, right? But people aren't having a conscientious amount of fluids, of hydrating fluids in the morning. So I tend to recommend at least a good 500 ml of water. And for me, that always includes a recommendation of some lemon and some natural mineral salts in there to create an electrolyte drink that not only supports your adrenal glands, which do have to wake up in the morning. This also allows for better conductivity and electrocapacitance on a cellular level, and for your water to be used more effectively, because water follows salts and these solutes. So we want to make sure that hydration is not just about water. It's about also the minerals and electrolytes you have within your system to use water properly in your system.
Well done. You know what? No wonder you've talked about this a few times, because it sounds like you've said it a few times. That was very good.
Sure have. Every day.
Yeah, I know. Like, that's why we're doing this, right? Because we say this stuff all the time. Another thing that you're a little more anal than I am about starting your day with something. I'm with you on this one, especially. I'm not as good with the water hydration advice, but this is why I'm glad we listen to each other, because I can get better listening to you too. But this one, the second thing that you think is important in the morning is something I'm really on board with. You can share that one too.
Yeah, it's delaying your caffeine take, which I know that some people are
Oh,
very
that wasn't the
mixed.
one I meant.
What are you talking about?
Teams.
What?
Protein.
Oh, well, I'm still on the first bullet point of our
Oh my
notes.
God. All right.
Following the
Okay, we'll
notes you
finish
took.
the
So
first one.
you meticulously took notes, Dave, and I thought you were trying to prompt me to that one. Um, so the other thing when it comes to hydrating your body in the morning correctly is not only having your water, but delaying your coffee intake. It's not that I'm against coffee. I love coffee. I have it every morning. Like, God bless
Having
it.
one right now.
God bless a bean juice. But what we need to allow for is to allow your natural cortisol spike to happen in the morning, and then having that electrolyte drink with the lemon and salts nourishes your adrenal glands, and allows for that cortisol spike. But if you have caffeine first, then you almost like over spike your cortisol response because it will stress your cortisol. So it's better to have your natural cortisol rise, and then as it starts to lower, having caffeine, which then might increase that peak again, and then you might have more of a sustainable result. And I've had some people even comment that they don't have so much of a 3 p.m. crash if they delay their coffee intake in the morning as well. And I've heard Dr. Andrew Huberman talk about this, and there's science to show this as well. There's evidence to back this type of a claim, but it's best to delay your coffee. And I usually say at least 1 hour, but I think most of the studies say 90 minutes to 2 hours. An hour and a half to 2 hours is, I think, where Andrew Huberman, based on his insights, has commented. But I was like, if you can at least delay it by an hour, that's still better than you just jumping to caffeine right from the jump. So
That's a tough one for me to implement.
really, are you a caffeine from the jump?
I like it in the morning. I would say, yeah, on the way to work, which would be probably, yeah, maybe about an hour. Maybe about an hour. So I might be
Yeah,
okay.
I love my caffeine too, but
Mm-hmm.
I've been like that lemon and salt routine that has been like embedded into my system probably well before my relationship with my current partner started, which has been 10 years. So I think I've been doing this for like 12 plus years now. And now there's a lot of science to show that there's benefits to that, and people, more biohackers and quote unquote, are talking about it. Um, Whatever. I'm just ahead of the curve. It's cool. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, we're used to it, right?
Yeah. So the other thing you were talking about was protein.
Yeah, take that one too, because you're
Great.
better at emphasizing this one.
So what I have found is, Dave and I have talked about time, energy, money as a limiting factor for people to implement new changes in their lifestyle. And as much as I want people to exercise in the morning, I also know that when you're a parent and when you are not sleeping well and running around with your like a chicken with your head cut off in the morning, it's
Yeah.
hard to factor in certain habits. But what I will always stress to people is trying to get a better protein based breakfast. A croissant is not going to hold you. And if you find that you're having a cereal or a piece of toast with a little bit of peanut butter and jam, and then you're reaching for snacks mid morning and reaching for snacks mid afternoon and having to have a second or third caffeine intake, it's likely because you started your day off quite pitifully when it comes to meeting your body's basic needs. And I find women are far more notorious about this. Sometimes we might skip breakfast, and people are doing a lot of fasting, but I find mums tend to just pick at whatever their kids had left on their plate and then they run out the door kind of vibes. So
That's true.
yeah, that's true, all parents, but
I do it.
whether you're working out or not, you should be focusing on improved protein intake. Now, I guess that's a lie. It's not just women, but I primarily see women in my practice. But the men that come in my practice, they kind of say it with like a badge of honor, being like, well, I eat oatmeal, so like that's a good breakfast. And I was like, what's your oatmeal? And it ends up being instant oats, maple and brown sugar. And I
Yeah,
was
no
like,
thanks.
hex to the no, guys.
Yeah.
So I'm having to train a lot of people about their protein. And a lot of women are like, so usually what I say is if they're not having any, or some people will say, well, I have 2 eggs and then I'll have a piece of toast. And I was like, well, 2 eggs only counts to about 12 to 14 grams of protein, 2 large eggs. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, we should be getting no less than 25 to 30 grams of protein at every meal. And they don't know how they can't fathom what that means portion wise on their plates. So usually I tell people, try to at least reach 20 grams of protein at your breakfast and just start making that a habit. And sometimes that even already feels like a lot more food than people are willing to have. And I think part of that is that people's stress response is tapped out in the morning, so they don't get the appetite they need, or they're used to running out the door. So again, their stress response is interfering with their appetite, or they're snacking at night, which interferes with their morning appetite. So they don't know how to accommodate a proper meal in the morning, even from like portions perspective. So I try to work with them as like smoothies, or maybe a couple of eggs, and maybe you have to have a small protein shake on the side just to like, and some berries just to, fill in the blanks and stuff. But I gotta say, when people start shifting and having more protein consciously in the morning, it's a game changer for people. Like better energy, better mood, better stress response, better mental clarity, less
Sets up your
snacking.
blood sugar for the day, right?
It totally does. I mean, and
So,
that's a big thing. So, you talk about that then.
I'm going to do an organic sort of slide into another thing I want to talk
Okay.
about in a minute, which was the stomach as a limiting factor. And here's another limiting factor that I've found as a hopefully like a stomach whisperer, but people who have stomach issues don't want to eat in the morning. It's like it's I know it's a stomach sign now. So if
Agreed.
people don't want to eat in the morning, you really have to think about the stomach. And then we come to this point where you see the stomach is a limiting factor, because if they don't want to eat in the morning, then they may not eat healthy food in the morning. And then they've got this caloric sort of deficit that they're going to try later on to make up for, and then maybe overeat at dinner. And we'll talk later about eating later and how that's not so hot either. So that's just an organic sort of pitch for the stomach sliding into this healthy breakfast.
I agree.
And yeah. And so the other thing, what did you said something else about you said something else about that. Anyway,
About the,
that slipped my mind.
yeah.
But the idea here is the stomach as a limiting factor. So maybe I'll just go into that a
Yeah.
little bit, because we had the organic slide into that. The stomach is primarily responsible for the efficiency of absorption of minerals and proteins. And so again, the protein thing fits here.
Yep.
And then iron, being, a mineral of major importance for another limiting factor, which we'll get to, which is energy. And then there's a conglomeration of like a whole bunch of stomach sort of related issues that can come together. So anxiety, issues with dopamine, because iron's needed to make dopamine. And then I found I think every kid that I can't say every, I want to be precise with what I say, but the vast majority of kids with emotional regulation or attention deficit or hyperactivity, they have issues with the stomach and iron. And then there's a link that the thyrogastric link, which is between the thyroid and the stomach. So I'm finding a huge link between thyroid disease, which I find difficult to treat reproducibly and reliably, but it comes from the same embryological tissue actually as the stomach. So that there's like a kind of scientific rationale for like treating its neighbor, the stomach, and then hoping that the thyroid improves a little bit as a result of that. And then when you're talking about just like the hardware of health, like absorption of everything, like everything, not just minerals and proteins, but if you've got any absorptive deficiencies, then you got to fix the stomach. It's so responsible for that first step. And then fatigue, probably as it relates to emotional dysregulation, the vagus nerve, and just being like kind of like emotionally more dysregulated. That's tiring. So anxiety is tiring. It's an energy requiring state. And then you've got how iron links into this and fatigue. So just stomach as a limiting factor because of it's got its tentacles in everything. So yeah, stomach as a limiting factor is something I talk about every single day. I think I lost you there. Hello?
Sorry, I was on mute because I had previously had a coughing attack, and then I forgot to take myself off mute. Sorry, guys.
Oh.
I did warn you of that, but your affinity for the stomach is no surprise to me or to our audience, I imagine, at this point in time. But I also agree, and even with my remarks about stress, we both know, you and I, that stress greatly affects your stomach function. So a poor night's sleep,
There's
a poor
another
night's,
one.
you're right, a poor night's sleep, eating too late, running out the door quickly. I'm not surprised people don't have a big appetite in the morning. I was one of those people, but I was also a stress case and my stomach acid wasn't good. So, but now I conscientiously try to have a proper breakfast. And it depends on who you talk to. Some people are like, yes, intermittent fasting. For women, it has to be at different times. Some people are saying you should have 30 grams of protein within 30 minutes of waking. You know, there's a lot of different philosophies. I just feel like how you choose to break your fast needs to include sufficient protein, however you decide to do it, whether you're male or female, wherever you are in your cycle as a woman, whatever you're, you know, that's really the take home message, guys. So
I'm with you on that one.
That's a big one to me. And then that greatly improves blood sugar balance, which we've already touched on. So I know this is a big one for you as much as it is for me. So do you want to like take
I'll
this
start. You can, I'll start. You can finish. I mean, I insulin resistance is, I mean, I talk about this with patients a lot, like foundational set points that influence many things. Like we talked about the stomach and we talked about with hydration and protein. These are like foundational things that then can have corollary, whatever, far expansive benefits on all systems. And I think blood sugar is one of those. If you told me the main thing I'm looking for with people on labs is going to be iron deficiency, anemia, maybe some deficiencies of vitamins that are well taken care of in terms of like their lab science is pretty good, which is B12 and vitamin D. But the other one's going to be insulin resistance and blood sugar.
Yep.
And you know, I think you're a little bit better with your understanding of how it's going to affect cortisol and all the, like you've just done. I think it's been, you just know more. But so I'll get you to sort of finish this little chapter, but I find it a foundational thing that if you address first maybe iron deficiency and then, or at the same time, blood sugar, insulin resistance, the vast majority of your people are going to either feel better, like intrinsically feel better, or they'll have more energy to then do more good stuff to feel better. Because a lot of times we just have to give people the experience of having more energy to do the things that they already know to do, rather than like just telling you more stuff to do.
Yeah. You know, again, time, energy, money. If you are deficient on time and energy, you could throw money at stuff, but are you going to take it? Are you going to implement it? Are you going to do it? You know, there's that's the key. So if you can make some small changes that improve your energy, then that's one more thing you have a little bit more of, to then make smarter changes. I find a lot of people's insulin, it's rare. When I run insulin, it's rare that I actually find someone. It's not rare, but it's less common that I find someone who's actually having healthy insulin response on at a fasting state and then running their HOMA-IR score. I had a 13-year-old girl actually stopped getting her period, and since December they came to see me, and she eats an atrocious diet that's pretty much carbohydrates, doesn't like vegetables according to her, and is also very extremely restricted with what proteins she'll eat. So this goes hand in hand with our conversation. So I've had to have some very serious talks with her about the importance of what you're eating and your dietary habits. And her mom was very pleased that I was taking that approach. She's like, me and my husband have tried to say this to her, but she doesn't seem to care. But then when we ran some testing, her insulin was high. And when I ran it through the HOMA-IR score to check her insulin resistance, she was at a 2.5. 2.9 is significant insulin resistance. Anything over a 1.9 is already considered insulin resistant or less insulin sensitive. But 2.5, I was like, honey. And then, you know, I was like looking at this being like, what if you have PCOS? Because no doctor's running deeper stuff. We ran the hormones together. And I said, if that's the case, it's an insulin problem. We got to start being more serious about our dietary habits, because right now we're just driving things in the wrong direction. And I think that is a large component to Doesn't mean it's the only thing, but I think it's a significant component to why her period is gone, because with PCOS, you can get irregular periods and it could be insulin driven more often than not. So there's
Yeah,
a
it's a
lot of
hormonal joker card, right? When you do that with insulin, it's just like the joker card just throws everything off hormonally.
right. And that's just one example of how dysregulated insulin will have an effect on people. But then I'm going to go back to even what I said earlier. If you get the right minerals and the electrolytes, it allows your cells to be healthy and it allows your cells to have better insulin resistance, because it's not just about the blood sugar, it's about all the moving parts. You need to have cofactors, you need to have some, zinc, and you need to have like vanadium and all these like micronutrients, and you need to have a healthy cell membrane of healthy fats and all these things. So that's where avoiding inflammatory oils is important, which should be part of our conversation today, is making sure you're eating the right types of fat. All of that contributes to insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity as well. So yes, the carbs, but it's also all those other moving parts, which is why like having a well-balanced diet is extremely important. It's not just about the carbohydrates. We like to be very myopic about certain things.
I'm going to, you brought something up that naturally made me think of another influence of the stomach. And that's on, you said this young 13-year-old, you said?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. She's not interested in probably eating many vegetables. This is where I learned a lot by thinking like a stomach. If you think like a stomach, then you can understand more about it. And a lot of the issues with appetite are stomach issues. So like if a person has no desire for a certain macro type, like I can't handle heavy protein, it's like, oh, the stomach probably doesn't like it, or I can't handle XYZ, whatever it is. You have to think possibly it's the stomach having a huge influence on the person's desires, because who's on the hook for eating everything? The stomach. The body needs the stomach to do its work and extract and all that. But if your stomach is like kind of weak in certain areas, it may show itself in terms of, oh, my appetite's not good. That's why I said the morning appetite is another interesting one. Like the stomach's basically saying, no, not yet. I'm not ready.
Yeah.
I need to sleep in kind of thing.
Well, this particular patient doesn't sleep well, so she doesn't have much of an appetite in the morning.
That won't help.
But she tends to choose carbs. And when I've specifically asked her, do you not eat animal protein or do you not eat vegetables because it causes discomfort? Does it cause heaviness? Does it make you lethargic? It was none of that. It's a preference for her. However, she might not be fully connected to preference.
I was just going to say, she just may not know.
She's also had a lot of antibiotics as a young child. So I was like, is it dysbiotic? Is it certain pathogens that are making her crave more sugars on top of everything else?
And then they'll do that too.
And then it's layered and multi-layered. So we've had some really complex conversations. And I was like, I'm not trying to overwhelm the little 13-year-old girl, but I was like, I need you to understand that this is probably going to be various moving parts to get you back on track. So we're just going to start with the most logical step. And I said, but I'm not giving you a pill to regulate your blood sugar. I need you to start making changes with your diet. And I was firm about that. And I said, at the next appointment, if you're eating a little bit better, then I can add something in to help with your insulin resistance. But I was like, anyways, her mom was like kind of laughing in the background, or just kind of like giving me like a supportive here kind of vibes. But that blood sugar.
I've changed. Sorry, I'll just to finish that sort of thought, the loop with the stomach, is that I've actually changed. I give people the benefit of the doubt now and assume that the reason they want carbs or rice or potatoes or candy is that I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say that it's because the stomach doesn't have to do anything to absorb those things. So
it's easy to digest. It's not hard.
Yeah, it doesn't have to do anything. It's not taxing at all on the stomach. You eat a steak and a kale salad, man, the stomach has some work to do. Will the body benefit from the stomach doing, its extraction job? Yes. But now, and I used to just go, why? What's wrong with you? Why don't you eat that? Why don't you eat that? It's like, well, it's a body it's like a body response. It's not like a cognitive. Some of the smartest people I've talked to are like, oh yeah, I don't like vegetables. I don't think they just like don't like them like cognitively. I'm not sure I get along with cucumber. No, it's like there's something about the action of that food on the stomach which gives them a body response which they may not cognitively understand, other than, no, I'm just not into that. So
well, I mean,
I've decided to give people the benefit of the doubt, not just about stomach stuff, but in terms of like, I think there's not a lot of people are like just hypochondriacs. Like, oh, it's just because we don't know what they're talking about. We're not good enough at knowing the symptoms sometimes.
Just as a bit of an argument though, I think some people do think they dislike vegetables because they have been so addicted to chemical flavors and fats and sugars that when they eat something like a vegetable, it doesn't hit the same dopamine rush as they would otherwise get. So they then assume they don't like them because there's also a different hit we get from those chemically manipulated foods. And there's food scientists to strategically make that happen with the processed foods like this young girl is eating. So I think that when some people say they don't like vegetables, they actually mean it because they've trained their body to just ingest absolute
Well, then you have to
garbage
be
that
very,
hits,
we'd have to be
right?
very precise with how we look at it. We wouldn't say I don't like vegetables. You would say I prefer foods like potato chips that give you, like you said, like the food scientists have made these combinations that are
Right. But
like
what I'm saying
dopamine fest.
but what I'm saying is relatively then they're not going to like the vegetables because it doesn't taste as yummy. So then to their head, they're saying, I don't like vegetables. And I think that's where it comes in, is because relative taste, your taste buds are not excitable and your neurotoxins aren't going nutso and your dopamine isn't getting a hit when you eat a broccoli versus Takis. You know what I mean? So I think when
Yeah.
people, I think then, and so then people's mind, they're like, well, I don't like vegetables. I don't like broccoli. It doesn't give me the same hit. So they just avoid it. So I'm not saying, I think it's people's interpretation of that. And I think that is part of it is because of the chemical overstimulus of these artificially processed and manufactured foods. I think creates a bigger gap between the reward that you get by eating a piece of broccoli versus eating something
Yeah,
that's
of
chemically
course.
dry. So then people think, well, I don't like the broccoli. I like the Takis instead. You know what I mean? So I
Well, of
think that's
course.
where it comes into play. That's more of what I'm trying to say. I think
Yeah,
that creates
I
a
think
bigger
there's
divide.
separate. I think they're separate things. Like I prefer eating a potato chip to like eating like a carrot. There's something, if I'm just based on like, if I'm like hedonistically chasing dopamine hits, yeah, then I go with that. But
But I like
there's still
potato chips, but I
people,
also like vegetables. Like I
yeah,
like vegetables,
yeah. No, I like them too, but
but I
there's
also
some,
like junk food sometimes.
well, yeah, of course, because it's like you said, it's dopamine
Right.
setup, perfect dopamine setup. I'm saying there's still people are like, I try to eat it, and it's like the taste is off. Like, and that's why in Chinese medicine, if you remember in Chinese medicine, the association with the stomach is rotten.
Mm.
And that's because things actually taste different when your stomach is disordered. That's very, very, very important. And I try to share that with people.
I would
Your
also,
taste is disordered when your
yeah,
stomach is disordered. That's
I
why
would
you'll get
also,
metallic taste and weird like taste because things are not tasting how they're supposed to taste when your stomach is
I
disordered.
would say that would take me back to the minerals, things like zinc, because zinc has a lot to do with taste buds, but zinc also has a lot to do with improved stomach function too. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
that
And
like
you see all these
there
things
could be
feed
some
into each
mineral
other.
deficiencies, and anyways, yeah. So there's a lot of things to consider, people, but but just going back to importance of blood sugar, like this is kind of where this all stemmed from. I want to bring us back on track. When you eat in a way that regulates your blood sugar response, you find that you have to snack less.
Hmm.
You find that your energy is more level. You find that your
Hmm.
mood is more level. You have better mental
Hmm.
clarity. You sleep better because you're not getting blood sugar spikes that are then waking you up in the middle of the night.
Hmm.
Um, so that even if you are not type 2 diabetic or have cardiovascular disease or metabolic syndrome, you still need to eat to regulate your blood sugar because it is of extreme benefit to all of us to do this for all those reasons. And then every time your blood sugar crashes, if you have poor blood sugar regulation, every time your blood sugar crashes, your cortisol spikes. So then we're just like taxing our stress response system throughout the day on this wild roller coaster of like sugar spike crash, and your cortisol is just following suit with that too. So um that's another reason why I really stress that for people.
I think that advice is incontrovertible. Like you can't go against the blood sugar argument for things. I think that's one of the most important things,
Yeah,
stabilizing that.
big time.
One thing we breezed over, but I want to just make sure we give it enough of a voice is that energy as a limiting factor for everything. So if it's possibly the if someone comes in and they're like, I have XYZ problems and one of them is low energy, I generally try to focus on giving them more energy somehow, which is not usually by giving a pill that's full of energy. It's more like, where are you losing energy, or where are there inefficiencies in your body or system, or do you have a lack of iron or anemia or whatever? If you get that one sorted out, I think, like we brought up, time, energy, money, those resources, everyone's got two, pick two, or everyone's got, you won't have all three, is I guess what I'm saying. You can have two, but you're not going to have all three usually. And energy, when you have more of that, you just make better decisions, and it will allow you to do more on your own rather than depend on your naturopath. Did we lose you again? Are you with us?
No, I'm here, but my
Okay.
microphone didn't turn on as quickly as I could after I coughed. Sorry, guys. So, 100%. And that goes back to delaying your coffee, getting protein at breakfast, hydrating your body, blood sugar. That all helps your energy reserve be much more stable. And all of this doesn't necessarily require you to buy anything fancy. It doesn't necessarily require you to take an exhaustive amount of time out of your schedule to accomplish. It doesn't even have to be very expensive.
Yeah.
So just something to think about, guys.
Well, related to what you just said there, I remembered what I forgot earlier, which is that, you can, because of these things, as we talk about, you can see how they just sort of like meld into each other. If you pick one of them and do it really, really well, that is a smart thing to do. Like anything we're talking about today, if you pick one of them and do it really, really well, it may lend itself to non-specific global benefit. And because everything can be overwhelming and all that, that's not a bad thing to do, especially if you have low energy or you're just overwhelmed and don't know what to do. Like, just no snacking after dinner. I don't eat late at night.
Yeah,
that's a big one.
Yeah, that's where you
And
being a skilled naturopath and having proper intake and communicating with your patient and meeting them where they're at and understanding, this is how much I can challenge you to shift in this appointment, rather than throwing all of the kitchen sink at them all at once. I mean,
and knowing their resources, right?
And knowing their resources. So with a lot of my patients, we talk about foundational stuff. So it doesn't necessarily always require pills, because not everybody can afford the pills, especially not in today's days.
Oh my God.
No doubt. So we work where
in Canada anyway.
In Canada. But the thing is pills and supplements are just that. They're supplementary. They are not supposed to take the place of these foundational habits that most people should have, and a lot of people have completely fallen astray from. So voila. On the note of nutrition, we were talking, you hinted at this already too, about the timing of eating in relationship to sleep. Dave, do you want to bring it on home?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm pretty basic with it, but I tend to just like deter people from eating after dinner. And even if you eat dinner at like 7 or a little bit later, like just make that the last thing you eat, and have water and tea and stuff for the rest of your night. Well, obviously not caffeinated tea. But that can be like, if someone's got a fairly good diet, and this is where like what you said becomes really relevant. Like, they got a fairly good diet, they eat protein in the morning, whatever. But like every night I like to just sit down and have a bag of chips with my wife while I watch Netflix or whatever. It's like, just don't do that. Like, that's the number one thing to not do. Because eating late at night isn't just a GI issue. It just starts to change all your circadian rhythms. That's why that's my interest on it. Actually, Michelle, is through its influence on circadian rhythms and sleep and all that. Because if you eat later, you're gonna mess with your clocks of sleep and like just your circadian rhythm. So it's more than just a bad time to eat for me. And oftentimes people don't need the calories. They're looking for a dopamine hit maybe after like a day
because you're exhausted at the end of the day and you want that fix.
Exactly.
I have a woman right now who is quite stressed out, and she enjoys a glass or two of wine and either chips or popcorn almost every night. And she's like, I know it's not doing any good for me. And she's like, and my sleep's atrocious. And I was like, you need to cut that out right there. Right. And I was like, maybe that's where we start. It was just like, maybe just on weekends, Fridays and Saturdays, if you want to have your nights, but throughout the work week, every night before you have to go back into work, we're not doing that, so we can maximize your sleep quality. Because if your body's if your body is busy digesting food, then it's not doing all the stuff it's supposed to be doing during rest and sleep, period. Because it takes a lot of energy to digest food.
Yeah. That's a big one.
That is a big one. And I find that is a huge thing. And I can attest to this personally, that I can eat really well, but there's a lot of habits where at the end of the day, my partner and I, we would sit down and watch a show and we would snack, and then we would feel just like trash. And
Mm-hmm.
it was subtle. It wasn't always the next day. But if we kept up
Mm-hmm.
this habit for a period of time, we were like, we need to nip this in the bud. And I found that it affected my weight, it affected my mood, it affected my sleep. So I can definitely, even though my habits are better than probably 85% of our listeners in general, it still affected me.
Of
Right.
course.
So
Yeah.
this is not a great habit to have, and it's something that we all have to be more conscientious to nip, because it's a slippery slope. You start doing it once and it just starts becoming autopilot. It's like Pavlov's dog. You turn on Netflix and suddenly you feel like you want to have a snack.
Mm-hmm.
It's like ding, snack, ding,
Mm-hmm.
snack. Right.
Yeah, for
So
sure. I find especially the more you're sort of like, I saw one today, she like all she does is either work, homeschool, take care of everyone. Like she's got kids with special needs. Like it's just like, holy crap. People are pretty inspired. Like get a lot of inspiration. Um people do some hard stuff, you know.
mhm.
But anyways, like yeah, no wonder if she wants to eat something late at night. Like, am I surprised? A little dopamine hit after just giving hard every day, to
Yeah.
dependents and
Yeah.
etc. So like that's a lot. So you have to validate that, but like you said, you have to come down hard on the things that matter most and really stick to them if they're really important.
I get it. This world is crazy and people are exhausted. So
And
I
people are
understand,
like
I
amazing
understand.
too.
Yeah, people are amazing, but then that leaves them exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I am empathetic to why human nature is to find something that just gives them that little hit. And I get it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we also have to get some mind over matter kind of things and rise above that. And then your general sense of well-being will improve when we start making these changes. And you'll notice that it's just getting over that initial hump. It's tough. It's
Yeah.
tough.
The hard now, easy later idea.
Yeah.
You hopefully can do that like in a really efficient way.
Yeah.
Um, would you sleep? I mean, we've
Yeah.
done
Get
episodes,
it.
and even before we got together, we talked about with Leah Saunders about sleep. So like we could, if you want to check more about sleep, but it's just we'd be silly to not mention how important sleep can be, regardless of your sort of resources. I guess time is the one that affects a lot of people with regards to sleep. If you like work,
Hmm.
work, work, and work out, and you got kids and
Yeah.
hockey and cooking and blah blah blah, and then you're like, I only have 6.5 hours to sleep. It's like, man, that can be a hard one to budge. But we'd be remiss to not like say something about sleep.
Yeah, I find a lot of people are not getting enough sleep or not getting good quality sleep, or both.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's because they have the monkey mind and it's just going. And then some people, it's just because they have to work late or they're juggling a job and they're trying to finish their PhD and whatever. So they're
Right.
factoring that time in. So for me, it's always about how do we just optimize the sleep you're getting if that's all we can do. And I find this is where I often need more supplemental support, is to get people's monkey mind to calm down enough so they can reach a deeper quality sleep. I
Mm-hmm.
find just requesting people to improve their sleep hygiene usually doesn't do enough to get them into a good quality sleep, because most people are revving still at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so as much as I would love for people to do like a, you know, meditation at the end of the night to help them sleep, some of my patients
Yeah.
do, and they find that that's enough, but sometimes it's still not enough. So I find, again, this is where the supplements start to come in, like my magnesium or phosphatidylserine and relora and L-theanine or GABA or ashwagandha or whatever, or combinations of those things are usually what I'm using to help bring people's cortisol and stress response down and relax their system enough to just
Mm-hmm.
start regaining control of their sleep again.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
sometimes
if you have
that alone sometimes makes a game changer. And then the next day
sleep,
they come
yes.
back and they're like, oh my God, my energy's better. I don't know what you gave me, but like, thank you. And then all of the rest of their choices throughout the day, they can advocate better for themselves with the rest of
Mhm.
their choices because they slept better.
Yeah, it can be so simple. Even just little things like I'll say sometimes if you have the time. Again, depends on resources, but if you have the time, sometimes I just say like as part of an overall plan, like, okay, why don't you just have a bath and have a tea? And I'm saying you don't even have to have like a tea from the most like trendy herbal shop downtown bougie town. I mean, just having the tea as a kind of like ritual reminder that, okay, it's
Mm,
wind down time,
mm-hmm.
and sort of embracing the placebo ritual aspect. There's a reason ritual exists in like
Hmm.
every culture,
Yeah.
you know. So even if that's the least you do, I got no problem with that too. But we can't ignore sleep. My God, it's the rejuvenative nectar of everything.
So important. I love when people are
Yeah,
like, "Oh, I can run." Okay. I had this one guy, he was like, "Yeah, I used to be a massive insomniac and I felt like I could just run on 3 to 4 hours of sleep." And I was like, "Oh my God,
right.
how did you
You
exist in this
can't.
world?" But now he has all these health issues and he's like, "I try to get better sleep." And he's like, "And now I get 9 to 10 hours of sleep and I'm still exhausted." And I was
Hmm.
like, "Yeah, now your body's trying to
Burned.
play catch up and you're completely knocked out." So
Yeah.
anyways, sleep is extreme. I value sleep with all my heart. And when I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm just so upset about it.
Yeah. Do you want to move on to symptoms versus roots of problems?
Yeah, I find that this is a conversation I have to have repetitively. I
It's a hard one.
often, I often, when I have a meet and greet with patients, this is something I get to right off the hop when it comes to my philosophies as a naturopath and how I look at dis-ease or health and health concerns, um, is to talk about how the symptoms are not really the problem. The symptoms are like the gaslight when your tank is empty, and you're not going
Hmm.
to just fix the gas. You're not just going to put a band-aid over the light, the signal, right? That would be extremely inefficient long term. And just lead to breakdown. So for me, it's really about helping people understand how to connect the dots. And, this brings me back to some courses I talked about with Dr. A. And then part of why I brought Dr. Anderson on the episode to talk to us was how your body's always trying to keep you alive. And I found this language through his workshops. Your body's always trying to keep you alive. And when it's put under pressure, when it's put into a situation that causes stress, if there is a trauma, if there is an infection, if there is a chemical burden, if there's whatever, your body now goes into a compensated state, usually for the short term. However, if the original problem doesn't get dealt with, then now your body stays in a compensated state. And then another thing comes along, and your body decompensates or compensates again, and another thing, and then it has to make critical choices to keep you alive, and another thing, and then it steals from Peter to pay Paul. And then we end up with
Yeah.
symptoms. And then people are like, but my hair. And I was like, but your hair is not important to keep you alive. So what is it that your body's having to compromise your hair to rally its resources to ensure that your heart and your brain and your vital organs are continuing to work as best as they can under the given circumstances to keep you alive? And I find that most people aren't talking about the human body or quote unquote health or medicine in those terms, not enough at least, and definitely not in standard Western practices. They look at the disease and they often treat the symptoms. I'm not saying every doctor, but I find that it's a common theme, especially with people coming to see us as naturopaths. At least that's how they felt they've been managed or mismanaged, just because they just keep getting symptom relief recommendations rather than really dealing with the why.
Hmm.
And I'm finding that people get this, but they lose sight of it through the course of things because they're still focusing on the symptoms because that's what they feel. So as a doctor, it's important to be empathetic and acknowledge that, but also try to help them get back to connecting the dots and seeing the bigger picture again. And I find that's a common conversation I have with patients, even throughout their healing journey.
So yeah, that's a good segue into this other, seeing the bigger picture, like you're talking about, versus like maybe just a niggling symptom. Uh, and some of those symptoms can be like they don't look very big, but they're important. Um, and then I was going to talk about the origins of origins of symptoms or problems. Sometimes, and this is a hard one, is to get this one gets a bit maybe it's a bit nerdy or whatever, but I think it's really important to get out that the origins of some conditions, problems are like biochemical primarily, or mental, emotional, psychological primarily, structural primarily. And I'm saying primarily on purpose repeatedly because it's important, because you can have a bit of something can be like, a bit of a problem mentally, emotionally, but it's more because the structures in the brain are actually compromising the function, which is experienced subjectively. So it gets nerdy and weird, but I think it's really important because like I had a guy today, and so he came for his lab review today. His labs are pretty much perfect. They're almost perfect. And Michelle, like we do fairly comprehensive labs to and then we look at the labs with a little bit more granularity, I guess, or like a lower threshold for dysfunction or whatever. And it wasn't that much. And he said like I think bloating and constipation were primarily what sort of brought him to come in. Um, and so, okay, so it looks like the biochemistry is fine. I did some visceral manipulation last time, and he comes in today for his follow-up, and he's like his bowel movements are great and everything's moving now. He's like, was that just the psyllium you gave me? I'm like, no, I think it was the visceral manipulation because it happened too fast. Usually you don't get like that much of a resolution from psyllium like in a couple of days.
Mm-hmm.
And then it comes out today, there's a little more energy in the way he's talking. And it turns out, I think that there was some stressors going on that he wasn't too aware of. So mental, emotional stressors, I won't say too much because I don't want to say too much just to keep people's lives, private and all that. But I think those mental, emotional stressors then led to, because they transduce, if you know what I mean, like change form from one energy to another, like electricity and magnetism, like how there's that relationship. So the mental emotional stressors transduce into a structural problem in the gut, which then leads to his symptoms. The biochemistry was fine, but it gets confusing, right? Because now he's kind of wondering, why do I feel better already, or why are these things better already? And he's wondering, he came in wondering like, oh my God, what will my labs show? Nothing. They're fine,
Yeah.
So it's this weird interplay between different ways in which you look at things, like the biochemistry of the body, the mental, emotional, psychological experience of the person, and structural contributions, and how the one can lead to the other. And that's just a subgroup of ways of looking at things underneath, like symptoms versus root. Because if I just went based on symptoms, I don't know if I would have got the right answer.
Yeah, that's a tough one as naturopathic detectives.
Hard.
And sometimes people are not even honest with themselves. So they can't be honest with you about things happening in their life. And there's a lot that's withheld. And sometimes you're kind of like, okay, there's something there, but I don't quite know how to crack this person open to share more or
Mm-hmm.
direct them into the direction they need to be, because there's a resistance there. So
Mm-hmm.
it really is a fine dance to have to help get people to where they want to be. And it requires various moving parts to have to work together: your mental well-being, your biochemical well-being, your structural well-being, your nutritional well-being,
Mm-hmm.
functional or organ function well-being. Like there's a lot of things that have to work together to for the human body to show up in its most vital state. But
Mm-hmm.
then also to remind people that, again, going back to Dr. A, God bless him, your body's always trying to keep you alive, man. It's always doing its best under the given circumstances. And it's pretty incredible how much your body can compensate before there's actually a full breakdown. It's pretty wild what your body can do to compensate
Yeah,
and try to
people are amazing.
but just not even, yes, people, but like the human body,
I'm including that
I
in the
attach
people.
right? But just biochemically, how your body just starts to just rally and resource, and
Oh, it's
it's
wild.
pretty freaking incredible. And I don't, are we ever going to get to the point where we fully understand everything? I don't know, because it's too, there's a level of magic there that I don't think we're ever going to properly capture and understand
Ooh, yeah, I'm
conceptually,
with you. I'm with you on
right?
that.
There's a
Yeah.
level of magic within the human body that is pretty remarkable, and God bless it, man. Um, but anyways, yeah.
And this is something you said too. I think it's subconscious or deep. You said something how some of the stuff is like subconscious or you don't even know
Yeah.
exactly. I can tell you another person today, same idea. Um just gut concerns for the longest time. We've done some visceral manipulation. She's done radical diet changes. She's done she's got the time and the interest to like research everything about circadian rhythms. I get sun in the morning. I drink enough water with lemon. She's done all these things. And then I do because I've done that training for the Burrell Institute where it's visceral emotional relationships. And so
Oh yeah.
I put my hand on her to like I do the general listing on the top of the head, and she falls backwards. And this is a sign to the visceral people that there's like an emotional, like predominantly an emotional problem, which is and every time it happens, I'm like, oh man, God, like this is so hard because it's intangible. It's hard to talk about. You feel like a whack job, saying, there's an emotional problem that's sort of compromising the entire system here. So I did some visceral emotional work, and it looks wacky. You're not doing anything other than like interacting with the electromagnetic field of the person. And I'm pretty rational, right? I'm like going, oh God, I hope this works. And I do it. I'm looking for like any sign. You feel anything? She doesn't really feel anything. She doesn't know what she was thinking about the whole time. But then I watch her get up, and she got up with 1 out of 10 sort of discomfort when I watched her come in. She got up with like, it took her about 5 seconds, 7 seconds to like get up and get straight. So it's not conscious there, but it did something to like the body. That's just weird. Yeah. I don't know if that helps. So it just shows how there's some magic and weird stuff that's hard to explain.
I remember I was at one of my visceral manipulation appointments with one of our TAs, and I think it was like my second or third appointment with her. Anyways, doesn't matter. She ended up working on the opposite side from where my actual main pain points are, which I was like, I get conceptually, I understand. I understand that. Not everybody would understand that, but I get that, right? And and so she's working on some things there, and then she was brought to somewhere in my lower left pelvis, and then she also put her hand on somewhere around my heart level, like mid sternum level. And then eventually she was just led back to the mid sternum level. And then at one point, she did some stuff, and then she came back there later, but she had one hand underneath and one hand above. And I just started crying, and I had no freaking clue why. Like no clue. I started crying, and she was like, if you want to share what's coming up, I'm like, I wish I could, but I have no idea. And it just really something that I just like tears streaming into my hairline. You know what I mean? But I was like, to me, that doesn't surprise me, and it didn't surprise me. And I just surrendered and just accepted that this is probably what my body needed. And I was obviously holding something in that area, but it's wild. And I've had situations where, as more of a neophyte naturopath, I would say maybe like 10 or 9 or so years ago, 9 or 8, and 8 or 9 years ago, I had a patient and we were working on microbial stuff. They did one round of antimicrobial things based on certain testing we did, and they were fine. And then we changed it up the next month, and suddenly they started having anxiety and panic attacks because we unearthed something deeper that allowed those microbes to fester in the first place. And as we were shaking the tree with the microbes, the emotions that were attached to all that festering started to come up. And this particular gentleman, thankfully, he was understanding, and I was like, okay, then I think you need to start going to therapy or finding someone to work with to unpack this. And then when you feel more settled, you can come back to me. But otherwise we take a pause. And there was a lot that came up for him after as well. So when you start shaking the tree physically, it can unearth the emotional. When you start working on the emotional, it can start shaking the tree physically. And sometimes people don't always understand why, but it's, again,
including us.
Exactly. Listen, anyways, it's just so just back to the main topic. There is some key foundational things that do need to be addressed, and these are the types of things Dr. Dave and I guess, have repetitively in conversations, that we have to think about the origin. And sometimes it's not tangible, and it's intangible, or it's subconscious or emotional. Sometimes we have to remind our patients that your symptoms are just an expression of the disease state, but they are not of the disease or health issue itself. We have to talk about hydration. We have to talk about sleep. We have to talk about proper nutrition to regulate blood sugar, to meet your macronutrient needs. To also, we didn't get a chance to talk about movement, but movement's a key one as well.
Oh yeah.
Right? You got to move your
Yeah.
body. We're not supposed to be static as
Yes.
as humans. So all of these things are foundational, and not all of them need a fancy protocol. Not all of them need fancy pills. Not all of them require an exhaustive amount of effort, time, or money. So start with one thing, and like Dave said, just maybe focus on one thing and getting that consistent, and then add another one. But these are the things that we're constantly have to tell patients and remind them about, or in those first 2 visits being like, you're missing some key points of foundational work, guys. Here's what we need to eventually hit, if not all today, right? So that's that. Yeah,
that's a good summary. And I think what I'll do, Michelle, is I'll share this with new patients, because I think it's a good sort of summary episode to get people ready for whatever's needed when seeing a naturopath. So thanks for helping me sort of summarize a lot of the stuff we chat about.
Indeed, sir.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
You take care. Get well.
Thanks.